Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ryan Lamar, the host of the Youth Leaders in Wealth Management podcast. And today I am having the pleasure to be joined by Clifford Cornell. And Clifford is a Mullenberg College alumni, a certified financial planner, and is currently an associate financial advisor at Bona Wealth. And he's the writer of the Yield to Maturity newsletter. So, Clifford, thank you so much for coming on.
Totally, Ryan. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited for our discussion.
Yeah, man, and you got a really cool niche that you guys have at Bonafide Wealth that I think would be a great opportunity for some of the younger students that are interested in the industry to learn about. So, just to kind of get the conversation going, can you describe your career journey from Mullenberg College to becoming an associate financial advisor at Bonafide Wealth?
Yeah, totally. So I think my path to becoming an advisor was a little different than most. I had always been interested in finance in general, and I love helping people. So I always wanted to be on the personal side of things. Assisting people in growing their wealth and learning more about money so that they can live the lives that they want to. Um, Money can be a tool, to kind of live purposefully. Um, I started out at Bonafide Wealth pretty much fresh out of college. My boss, Douglas Bonaparte, had posted on Twitter. He's got a pretty large following over there, and he said that Bonafide Wealth was looking for their first associate. I said, I don't really have much to lose at this point in time, so I'm going to submit a resume. I'm not sure if this guy's, making a joke here. I don't really know what his deal is. One thing led to another. I did a couple rounds of interviews with Doug and his vice president, and ultimately they said they'd love to have me on board, and I couldn't have been more excited. It's exactly what I had envisioned. Kind of being in college and wanting to become an advisor at some point. I knew that I wanted to work for a small firm, um, and Doug being, a smaller RIA was just absolutely ideal for me. So it all stems from Twitter and back in the day, and his post, and that's ultimately how I found Bonafide Wealth and found out they were hiring. So I think it's the funniest thing to look back and kind of think that I pretty much got hired because of a tweet.
That's hilarious, getting hired over a tweet, but it just goes to show the power of social media, right? Like, just you are scrolling on Twitter and you see an opportunity, and looking back, it's a very small thing, but then you go through through your whole future, and this is where you end up. So that's really awesome to hear.
100%. You can't discount social media, networking, and opportunities are out there. You just got to be willing to look for them, right?
Oh yeah, 100%. It's a very hard game to play, looking for the opportunities, but they definitely are out there. And a lot of the youth leaders in wealth management students are students that are in college looking to come into this industry. So, can you give us a little bit of information about how your journey in college was? Like, did you always want to become a financial advisor, or was this something that you kind of fell into?
Yeah, no, definitely. That's a great question. Um, when I went to college initially, I didn't really have any idea as to what I wanted. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't really know what I wanted to study. I actually did not even declare my major until I began my junior year of college. Um, I had kind of this eureka moment after my freshman year of college where I started to get really interested in money and how it worked and how it came in and out of my life and, how to invest and all of those types of things. And ultimately, I think that really kind of drove me to want to, follow the finance track. So ultimately, going into my junior year, I declared finance as my major. I took all the, pretty much every finance course that I could get my hands on. The college is a small liberal arts school, so I had to do a lot of general requirements and a lot of different classes that were outside of finance, which, you know, wasn't necessarily finance related, but made me a more well-rounded individual for sure. And ultimately, yeah, once I figured that out, I loved the finance courses. I excelled in them. I did well. I think it's because I really wanted to understand the material, and then ultimately was even able to graduate a semester early. So that was a very fun experience for me.
Yeah, it sounds like you worked hard if you can graduate a semester early. And what was like your favorite finance class?
Yeah, definitely. I actually had recently just reached out to my professor. I took this derivatives course, and obviously we don't do too much in the derivative space, being an RIA. But I really just loved the professor, and I loved the content that we were going over. It was a little bit more in depth. It was one of the more advanced classes where you needed to have done prerequisites, and it just felt like I was gaining so much that I couldn't necessarily gain online. I feel like I have a pretty general understanding of, a lot of different financial topics, and that was one of them where I felt I was really gaining from taking that course.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like that would be a really valuable tool to know, even if you don't necessarily provide like derivative based products with what you guys are doing. But I think those type of things are really interesting to know and just are really great for encompassing a full knowledge of the financial industry. And that actually brings it right into my next question here about your MBA in finance from Stony Brook. So I'm assuming that you went even deeper than compared to like a regular undergraduate course. So what role did your MBA and your CFP designation play in actually shaping your career?
Totally. So the MBA is in progress. Just began that in the fall. I'm actually in the midst of finals week as we speak. Very fun for me. I think the MBA is going to definitely accelerate my knowledge in finance. I'm really looking forward to a lot of the courses that they offer. They offer, some really nice behavioral finance courses that I'm definitely looking forward to. Obviously, as an advisor, that's something that interests me is, essentially how people view money, how they feel about money, and kind of the psychology behind those feelings. The CFP I completed in July of 2023. And I mean, that was an incredible experience. The CFP, exam really shed light on how in depth, planners really go. I think that a lot of people that are younger or may not really have that much experience with understanding what the CFP designation is, kind of have this idea of a financial advisor as somebody that's recommending stocks, right? And that's kind of a classic. Like that's most of our parents' financial advisors, somebody that has their accounts. They talk to them maybe once a year, but there's not real, financial planning going on. The CFP was great for me. I loved it. I did my coursework, and then I did my 3 month, intensive review, which was great. Ultimately passed the exam, and it really just shows how granular, the planning industry or, financial planning can get, obviously going through cash flows, from the simple things from cash flows and budgeting all the way, through estate planning and trusts and, high level, generational wealth transfers, which, the CFP gives you kind of an insight to all of those things and just makes you a very well-rounded planner.
Yeah, it seems like planning is almost like a foreign idea to some of the older clients that have a more of a, I guess, a taste in their mouth with the industry about like investment management. Like I had a conversation with my dad recently, and he knows I'm going to be a financial advisor in the future, and he's like, "Oh, you're gonna pick stocks for people?" I'm like, "Well, that's not really what people do anymore." It's so the CFP really helps you learn about all the financial planning pieces, which I think is the most important part for people like me learning. It's not really necessarily about completely investment management anymore. It's more of the financial planning piece, right?
100%. And we let all of our clients know that, while we do work with clients in an AUM, we do have an AUM model. Um, the vast majority of our value is derived from planning, right? Where we can go in and we can take a look at every aspect of somebody's financial life, whether that's, the investments, retirement planning, their budget and their cash flows, liquidity analysis, any of those things that like kind of all mesh together to really give you a holistic view of your financial life. Um, and ultimately, working with younger professionals, the firm leads with financial planning. We're well aware of the value that that offers relative to, investment management, and investment management is really just a small piece of the pie. I always bring it up, but I believe investments only makes up about 17% of the CFP exam, which is kind of a wild stat for a lot of people to think about, right? Because there's just so many different aspects of comprehensive planning outside of just investments.
There's so many aspects, right? And I barely know it. I mean, I'm hoping to do the CFP in the future, and I'm an economics major here at Binghamton, so it's not, I don't get the same level of finance classes that someone like that has gone through a CFP and a typical finance degree may have. So I'm super interested about learning about that in the future. And you touched on like the younger generation there for a second, and I wanted to ask you about the Young Money Plan. So,
Definitely.
what is the Young Money Plan, and how does that address the unique financial challenges of the younger generation?
Totally. So Douglas and I kind of went to the drawing board for the Young Money Plan. Ultimately, I kind of brought this to Douglas and I said, I'd love for us to have an engagement where, young professionals can work with a certified financial planner at a fee that's fairly reasonable because, generally working with a planner is definitely a privilege. Obviously some people, especially when they're just starting out, they may not have, a few $1,000s for an annual planning engagement, anything along those lines. And, I'm seeing my friends, pursue higher education, advanced degrees, law school, further designations, whether that's CPA, anything along those lines. And, I see my peers that are, they're just about to make it, right? They're getting there. They're putting themselves in a place where they're going to be able to grow their earnings and ultimately accumulate wealth. And I wanted to have a baseline plan where people can come to us and say, okay, look, I need some type of engagement so that I can kind of understand my finances much better. And we're trying to do that at a reasonable, kind of a reasonable fee for younger people to get their foot in the door and work with an advisor. Because ultimately, I can't tell you how many times I've heard it on, plan review calls where somebody's in their mid 30s or early 40s and they say, gosh, I wish I had started working with you guys 10 or 15 years ago. I would be in a completely different scenario right now. So ultimately, the Young Money Plan stands to, help recent college grads and very young professionals kind of get off on the right foot, ultimately so that they're starting to think about their cash flows. So that they're trying to, understand their student loan payments, whether that's, getting on an income driven repayment plan or, kind of knocking that debt out to the extent that it needs to, reviewing any toxic debt, such as credit card debt. I know that that's, unfortunately a common topic for a lot of recent college grads. And then really just trying to build systems and get into rhythms of what can be saved and, kind of really just put them on the right trajectory. Because I think everybody in our generation is generally pretty bullish on our generation. I think we're pretty hardworking people, people that have, kind of done the work. They've went to college, they've gotten degrees and then maybe even more degrees after that. So the Young Money Plan really served to target that demographic of people that may not have $500,000 to go park at a firm to get some financial advice. I really wanted to kind of open the gates to anyone and everyone that's looking for, a financial plan to some extent.
It sounds like a great initiative that can help a lot of people, and it reminds me of the adage, if it's not about timing, it's about time in the market, right? So if you guys can help people, younger people, get in earlier, that's going to pay much dividends down the road, when it comes to a financial planning perspective. And when you guys work with a lot of these younger people that actually do have the opportunity to come in when they're in their 20s, early 30s, what is the biggest financial misconception that you often see that people believe when they're younger and just don't have the experience or the level of assets that you would traditionally see?
100%. There's two of them. The first one being, I feel like a lot of people come and work with a financial advisor thinking that we are ever going to, or at least us, that we are ever going to ridicule somebody for how they spend their money. We are much less concerned with how much money you are spending and where you are spending it than we are how can we increase earnings, because we can only squeeze that bottom line so much, right? That's a loser's game. You can only penny pinch so much, right? You can only cut expenses to a certain degree. Versus growing your income, that's a completely different story. The sky is the limit there, whether that's pursuing another degree or, higher education, certifications, designations, anything along those lines that can further your career. So I think it's funny that a lot of people, they'll start backing themselves off. Oh, well, I spent this much. And we're like, no, that's okay. Like, we're not too worried about that. We want to, of course, we're trying to make sure people aren't taking out credit card debt or spending way outside their means, but we're not ones to tell you how to spend your money. That's for you to decide. Ultimately, we're going to tell you what's being spent and what could be saved. And ultimately, we want to focus on how to grow earnings. Um, Another misconception that I see amongst the younger generation is that financial planners or investing is reserved for the wealthy, and I don't think that that could be further from the truth, especially in today's day and age. There's a plethora of no fee brokerage platforms where you can go place trades for fractional shares. There's planning softwares and different apps that can assist you in budgeting that are essentially free. That are all like little pieces of planning, and back to the young money plan, that was another thing. I wanted an engagement that would be attainable for younger professionals, where they kind of realized, okay, I don't need to necessarily have X amount in assets to go park at some firms that I can get an annual meeting. No, we want to work with anyone and everyone, and we wanted to make that attainable too.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a lot of the people our age don't understand, you know, budgeting in the same way that they think like I got to penny pinch every single number to do it. And you guys have this approach that it's more about maximizing your earnings than minimizing your spending, which I think is great and something that I think I've learned as I've budgeted and kind of developed as like a financial advisor, an upcoming financial advisor, how important a budget is and the different pieces of that. So thank you for sharing that. And investing is something that is not reserved for the wealthy. Like you said, there's so many no fee brokerage platforms now that's so awesome that just didn't exist back in the day. And the level of information that's available out there on how to smartly invest is definitely attainable for people my age and a little bit older, a little bit younger. So that's awesome to hear. And I wanted to ask a little bit more about what your kind of day to day, week to week tasks were as an associate financial advisor right now.
Yeah, definitely. Good question. Um, my day to day consists a little bit of everything. I handle all of the trading at the firm. I build financial plans throughout the week. I revise financial plans that have already been delivered. Um, I work with clients in my own capacity as well as serving as a support advisor to Douglas as I, obviously get more and more experience. This is about 3.5 years I've been at Bona Wealth, and I'll forever be in debt to Douglas for the amount of experience that I've gotten here. Um, Ultimately, that's kind of my day to day. Obviously, answering client emails as they come in and out, money movement, people need cash. End of year tasks. Right now, we're reviewing certain things such as tax loss harvesting, making sure that RMDs have gone out. Um, Anything along those lines is kind of my day to day. I kind of have my hand in every pot here over at Bonafide Wealth, which has really given me such awesome experience over the course of the last 3.5 years. It's been great.
Yeah, it sounds like it'd be great, just that level of experience. And something that I want to know as I kind of transition into coming into the industry, do you learn a lot of these things like money movement, revising financial plans, trading? Is that stuff that you learn more in a textbook, or is that really just stuff that you learn on the job and as you get experience?
It's a great question. I think that this goes hand in hand with ultimately when I was studying for my CFP exam. Without having done my day to day, and if I had not done my day to day and been working while I was taking, my CFP review courses, I don't think I would have done nearly as well on the exam. Ultimately, it's a lot different to see things in practice than it is to read them in a textbook, right? Additionally, the CFP exam is mostly, you're studying all these different aspects of planning, but you're not necessarily studying too much of, how a firm runs and how things actually work in real life. You're studying concepts and all these different things that might not really fit into your day to day other than when you're building a financial plan. So I think that the experience for us, especially for younger people looking to attain that designation, I think that a little industry experience can go so as far as assisting your studies when you're doing that. I know a lot of people are studying out of college or during college for their CFP exam. For me, I'm not sure that would have worked very well. I'm a very hands-on guy, right? I learn from doing and being here and given the freedoms that I have here at the firm. I was able to get my hands on so many different things that, ultimately when they were talking about it in the CFP review, I was kind of like, I've seen that before. Oh yeah. A solo K or an individual K. I'm somewhat familiar with that. I saw Douglas working with somebody on that, one time. And it's just, it's really, really helpful.
Yeah, experience seems like it's everything. It's hard to always take something that's conceptual in a textbook and put it directly into practice. So it seems like what you guys have had, working for 3.5 years has really allowed you to excel in those CFP courses and all the exams that follow. So it's great to hear. So from like a career development standpoint, like, what would you consider the most important factor for young professionals, and how can they best position themselves for long-term success in the industry?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And this is something that I'm still figuring out myself. Obviously, my career has not been that long. 3.5 years to me, it feels long, but I know that there's advisors that have been doing this for a lifetime. And I hope I am one of them. Um, I think connections are huge. It's an incredibly, especially in this industry, it's an incredibly tight knit industry. People are willing to listen to you. People are willing to take a phone call. I can't tell you how many connections I've made on LinkedIn and Twitter, in real life at conferences and things like that, where I now have legitimate mentors in my life that I speak to once a month for direction, for, anything that's kind of coming across my plate. I think that really, building meaningful connections is incredibly important. Adding somebody on LinkedIn, yeah, they say that's a connection, but that's not really one. Getting on Zoom or getting on a phone call, meeting somebody in person can really solidify those relationships, especially in this world where a lot of work is being done from home. A lot of people are not going into office. Um, I think especially as young people, it definitely shows drive too, right? I want to get to the office. I want to meet you. I want to take you out for a coffee. People will respond to that and they respect it. Given how small this industry is, it's ultimately it's kind of an abundance mindset. Nobody's out to get each other. There's more than enough to go around, and they will root for you. They'll be in your corner, even if they're at different firms who are so-called competitors. It's a very tight knit industry, and it's really cool to be in it and see how interconnected everybody is. And yeah, I would say that make as many connections as you can, and try to make a few of them very genuine, very real.
I think you nailed it on the head. And a lot of what people misunderstand about connections is, like you said, just by adding someone on LinkedIn doesn't mean that you're going to get a job or an internship. It takes a lot more effort than that, right? Going out for those coffee chats, having a phone call, a Zoom, that's where you can actually get to meet someone and learn about them. Because if you're not coming from a place of curiosity, people will be able to feel it, right? Like as someone that's in college and has conversations, how we came to having this podcast is exactly how you described, just reaching out, asking to have a meaningful connection, asking to ask you questions. And, that's what I think people are missing that are in college right now, that emphasis on curiosity and learning from people that are ahead of you. And that's what LinkedIn is so great for, and other platforms just like Twitter, how you used and leveraged Twitter to find a career opportunity that has been fruitful for the last 3.5 years. It's so powerful if you use it correctly, and I think you nailed it on the head there. So I appreciate that as advice.
Totally.
So I think one of the biggest news events in the last few weeks is the rise of the crypto industry in wake of the election and all the other aspects that may be affecting it. So you guys work with a lot of younger people in your firm, and I think crypto is something that's a little bit more on people on the younger side seem to be more excited about. So I wanted to ask, how is cryptocurrency shaping your guys' approach for wealth management, and do you see it evolving for young investors, or what is your opinion on that whole phenomenon?
100%. So, for the time being, we consider ourselves educators of the space, and we're more than happy to have any conversation about any cryptocurrency topic with any client. Um, it's definitely something that appears to be here to stay. Um, and we have to be aware of that, right? Obviously, as some form of financial markets, a financial advisor is going to have to answer questions on that. Um, More and more clients are being, interested in it. Obviously, with it making headlines, that usually brings about a couple more questions. And Doug and I are no strangers to the space. I'd say we're both fairly well versed in it. Douglas was mining Bitcoin back in 2014. I have been, I have experience with the crypto market since 2018. So we're fairly well versed, and we definitely keep an eye on the space, and we want to see, ultimately where things are headed, because it seems like as more institutions get involved, this is going to be a little bit stickier. Going back a couple of years, yeah, it was a little different. The conversations that we were obviously having less, and now with the rise of these, essentially cryptocurrency ETFs, it's really kind of changed the game, especially from a wealth management standpoint. So for the time being, we're actively having conversations with clients and answering any questions that they have, and kind of monitoring, ultimately how this scenario is going to pan out.
It's definitely a tricky scenario, and I think you guys have a good approach of approaching it as an educator. I really like how that kind of sounds, and I think that's a great take to kind of put onto this industry right now. So, thank you for the insight on that. And we're both from New York. I'm from Long Island. I believe you are too, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so I'm sure that we grew up going into the city, and there's a lot of history around the city, and especially in the World Trade Center. And if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, but your guys' offices are in the World Trade Center, right?
Yeah, World Trade Center 7. We have an office over there.
Awesome. So, what's it like working there? And like, it's such an iconic location and such significant history for the people of New York. So, what has that been like?
Yeah, it's awesome. I love our office space. I think it's great. I was oddly enough, I was there last night with Douglas. We were doing our annual review and going out for a firm dinner. So it's a great little home base there, especially anytime I'm in New York City. I know that I can always go there, especially if I was with a client. We have space to, ultimately meet with clients within the office, which is awesome. And it's really just served as an asset for the firm, just a home base, which is really awesome.
Yeah, everybody needs a good home base, right? And even with the emphasis on things like Teams and Zoom meetings and stuff like that, it is a good thing to have an office, it seems like. And I don't think that that would necessarily be going away in the future. And how do you feel about like the whole Teams versus in-person meetings? Do you have a preference on one or the other, or do you feel like clients may have a preference on one or the other?
I do, and this may be a hot take relative to other RIAs. We work with a lot of young professionals. A lot of people have two, three kids running around at home. Their lives are busy enough, right? High achieving professionals, very career focused, and at the same time building a family. I find that our client base absolutely loves the fact that we take a majority of our meetings over Zoom. I think that it frees up time for them. For me, I absolutely love it. I find that I have gained so much of my life back. Obviously, a commute to the city is an hour each way. Those are 2 hours back in my pocket that can be focused elsewhere. Um, so I think that ultimately, given our client base, for us, it's absolutely optimal. For a lot of other RIAs, I know that people prefer some in-person meetings, and they like to, have this physical connection with their advisor. Whereas, given our client base, it just seems to be working out very well. We take a lot of Zoom meetings. It's very flexible. It's very flexible for people. And it really frees up a lot of time for not only us, but also our clients.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like that's the direction that the industry is going. It's from a time standpoint. I think many people are starting to realize that time is such an important asset. It's something that I've realized that over the last few years about we don't get any more time. So to be able to save time and commute travels, not only for advisors but coming into the office can be beneficial. And some people may like that, and some people may not. And I think it's a great opportunity to be able to provide both, like you guys are doing. So I'm glad to hear that you guys are finding success in the virtual meetings.
Yeah, definitely. And, even on another note, we work with clients all over. We have clients in Hawaii. We have clients in Florida, California, which is awesome. So it's opened up this whole new, set of clients that aren't necessarily local to the tri-state area, it's really awesome to see, because we can always work around your schedule. We'll fit you in, which works really well.
Yeah, it's so cool to be able to connect with people that are on different time zones that you would never be able to really have a traditional relationship, 30, 40 years ago. And Zoom has opened up the opportunities to work with people not only nationally around the country, but even globally potentially, which is really cool. And working as a financial advisor in the finance industry, what is something that may surprise people about what it's like to work in this industry, and what's something that you really love about working in the industry as well?
Yeah, totally. Um, Something that might surprise people, I think, ultimately, as far as being a planner, one of the most intimidating things ever, which I would consider myself right in the midst of right now, is actually building, your client base. It's incredibly hard. It's very hard to get people to, one, trust you enough, and two, then ultimately work with you and pay you for your service, right? Those are two very different things. And I think that a lot of it is, really building rapport, finding, your niche where you want to focus your time, because obviously we can't service everybody, and we want to align our values with our client base. So that's why, ultimately we're kind of working with our peer group, young, high achieving professionals. But I think that's one thing that, can be discounted when you begin in the industry, is that, it's very tough, but stick it out. It gets awesome, and it slowly compounds, very similar to how your investments would, how anything does, right? Spiral up. That's what, I always like to say, spiral up. It gets better. Find yourself great mentors. And, ultimately it is a grind. It's totally a grind. And you have to really kind of embrace that. And, just understand that you're not going to build a book of business overnight. Not many people do. And, that's what makes it so meaningful. Right. And that's part of the challenge. And it will all compound upon itself.
It takes time. Anything worthwhile takes time. We're in an age of instant gratification with things like TikTok and Instagram, and people expect things to just kind of come like that, right? And I think that's really detrimental to people's mindset when it comes to like a career and relationships and families. It's stuff like that that's really worth it. Seems to take a lot of your time and effort, and spiraling up. It seems like a great way to kind of view that, and something I appreciate you bringing to my attention, because I think that works well in my head. So that's a great mindset to have. So I appreciate you sharing that.
100%. See the vision. That's what we always say. You have to see the long-term vision. The same way that we encourage clients to see the long-term vision, when we're in a bear market, right? Look, we have a 20, 30-year time horizon. I'd love to build a 20, 30, 40-year career. It's easy to get discouraged or feel intimidated on the front half of that career. But it does get better. And you can reach out to people that have been in the industry. Like for me, Douglas is a great resource, right? He's always encouraging. Cliff, I remember when I was in your shoes, I know exactly what it feels like. Follow my path, and that's incredibly encouraging for me. So always having somebody in your corner like that can really assist you in seeing the long-term vision.
Yeah, that's great. Mentors are so important for that, from that point of view, that they've been through your shoes. They took that long-term vision and it has worked out for them, and they can provide you on some of that reassurance and guidance that you may need on your journey. So I'm super glad to have, that you have a mentor, and I'm really thankful for people like you having these conversations with me and just giving me some of this insight. And, hopefully the people that are listening are able to gain the same kind of insight just from listening to these conversations. And that's what this whole podcast really is about, just gaining and learning from experience from people that just are a few steps ahead of you, maybe many steps ahead of you. But I think you're a great example of that. 4 years out into the industry, and you just have a really great mindset and a great attitude on it, which is really important. So thank you for sharing all that.
100%, Ryan. You're doing awesome stuff here with the podcast. I think that this is absolutely genius. I wish something like this existed when I was younger, so that I could go back and start learning from some of these people that are actually in the industry. You definitely have an awesome initiative. I'm sure you're building, great connections with everybody. So I'd say definitely keep that up. People will appreciate this. This is awesome.
I appreciate the kind words. Seriously, thank you. And kind of a final question to kind of put a real, hit the nail on the head here. If you can give one piece of advice to your younger self coming into this industry, what would it be?
Totally. Um, I think it would be see the vision. Things will happen. Keep working. Find different avenues. For me, that was posting on Twitter and making kind of having a voice for myself and just having fun with Twitter. Obviously, like you mentioned previously, I write once a week to my newsletter, Yield to Maturity. That's awesome for me. That's another avenue that gets my name out there even further. Posting on LinkedIn here and there. You really have to not only see the vision, but you have to kind of act on it as well, right? The work's not going to do itself. So you have to constantly be adapting and kind of, implementing try new things, like you're doing a podcast. I think that's awesome. I'd love to have my own podcast one day. Like, I think that'd be very fun. But trying all different things and learning from those that have come before you can be like pretty huge. So ultimately, really just adopt that long-term mindset, and it's as easy as practicing what you preach as an advisor, right? We're in this for the long haul. So the same way that I'm going to tell a client that they should stay invested for the long term, I want to feel that way about my career. And I want to do everything I can to ultimately be the absolute best advisor that I can be, whether that's constantly consuming more financial knowledge, learning more on whatever it may be, taxes, estates, investments, everything in that realm. It's really become a student of the sport. That's one of the things that I always say is this job's ever changing. The rules are changing, tax codes changing, all this different stuff. Contribution limits are changing. Everything's changing. So you have to be a little bit you know adaptive, and we'd rather be proactive than reactive on a lot of those things. So that's why we're kind of monitoring a lot of different stuff. What's working for other people? What can we try? All of that stuff. So keep a long-term vision, and know that if you stick with it, it's going to pay off, and it's going to be a very fulfilling career. I'm 3.5, almost 4 years into this, and I can already kind of feel that, and it's an amazing feeling.
Yeah, it seems like you have an opportunity to live through an amazing career, and being a lifelong learner and sticking to your vision and your plan is something that's crucial for that. So, thank you for that advice. And I appreciate you sharing that with everybody. And I can't thank you enough for coming on to the podcast here today. I know that if I was just starting out, brand new freshman in college, that this would be, an amazing podcast to listen to. So just learning from somebody that has so much wisdom ahead of where we are right now. So, seriously, thank you so much for coming on.
100%, Ryan. Thanks so much for having me. This was an awesome time.
I appreciate it. Yeah. And if you want to shout out like your Twitter or LinkedIn or anything, feel free. I will leave your LinkedIn and Twitter in the description as well.
Yeah, that sounds great. So my Twitter is Cliff Cornell _. You can find me there. Um, Yield to Maturity is readyieldtomaturity.com. And my LinkedIn is just, I believe, Clifford Cornell. So you guys can find me on all those platforms.
Awesome. Yeah. We'll be sure to share that in the description. And thanks again for coming on, Cliff. I really appreciate it.
Sounds great, Ryan. Thanks so much for having me.